Welcome to the January edition of the Community Call. Happy New Year. It is an exciting 2026 for us. We have a lot of things that we're working on and hoping to get delivered to you all. I'm just gonna do what I usually do at this point, which is top of mind what the product group is thinking about, and then I'll hand it off to you all to kind of talk about whatever's top of mind for yourselves. So, first thing, if you are local to the greater Seattle area, and even if you're not, which I suspect a lot of you aren't, there is a PowerShell summit that happens every year. We are going to be involved, and we are really looking forward to some of the content that we're hoping to release for that. So if you haven't been or you haven't heard of it before, there's a link in the chat for you all. It's the PowerShell and DevOps Global Summit. Obviously, PowerShell is going to be there, but so will Bicep and Terraform on Azure. This is going to be super Azure focused, tons of Azure practitioners, ranging from people who are, just kind of deploying some scripts to keep their cloud running, all the way to very mature CI/CD pipeline cloud practitioners who are running on Terraform. So hope you can make it out. We have sessions that are catered to each level, at least we did last year. So hopefully this year will be the exact same. And I think you'll get a lot out of it if you can make it out to Bellevue, Washington, which is right in the greater Seattle area. So I know that's only a 20-hour flight, I think, for Stu. So I'm sure he's going to be there. But yeah, for everybody else, if you are based in Australia, obviously don't feel pressure to make it all the way out. But if you do come, we promise it'll be worth your time. Other top of mind things. I have two topics for today. First one is MCP, and oh yes, I mean, Bilal's asking if Stu can fly business class, but I think Stu should get business class just for being an MVP and being a super cool guy, but 24 hours does not sound like fun. Someday we'll make it out to Australia, Stu. We'll come to you. So MCP servers, I wanted to chat about MCP servers. We're in the middle of finalizing what we're going to release with our Azure Terraform MCP server. I wanted to ask the group, if you're using MCP or if you're using AI today, how are you kind of working that in with DevOps? If you're integrating the two at all, or if you're using it at all. And if you're not using it, that's a really valid answer. And I want you to also come off mute and say, I think it's useless. But how are you using MCP servers right now, or how are you kind of trying to navigate the DevOps world with MCP? Or AI in general?
Are you asking, sorry, Stephen, are you asking specifically within CI pipelines? So as doing some kind of LLM checks on code, say, as a pre-deployment check, or what?
It's whatever you do. So if you are doing like a pre-CI check with AI, that's one way to do it. If you're using agents to help you write modules, that's another way to do it. If you're trying to deploy some code through talking with MCP or some other tooling, if you're interfacing with Cloud Code versus if you're just working in GitHub Copilot or in the portal, I think those are all things that I'm curious about, if people are willing to share.
I can jump in without going too commercial. So yeah, we're using VS Code. I'm using, I say what I'm using, VS Code, Copilot, MCP, absolutely. So there's obviously Microsoft have got the Eva MCP. We're using that for things like Azure API conversions. The general Azure Docs MCP, Context 7, that sort of thing. So yes, heavy use of that. Using it to write code, absolutely. Yeah, it typically writes the first version and then gets human review afterwards. So that tends to be a really good pattern. And we've started exploring using it as a guide, a helper, sort of how to deploy complex things, things prerequisites to think about processes and that sort of thing. I think that's a summary of what we're doing.
Cool. I think I heard someone else coming off mute. Do they want to share?
I was just going to say at where I'm in week 1 at Datacom now, but where a previous company, we were using DescriberBot to write pull requests descriptions because we are all so terrible at that.
Yeah. It really helps with a lot of the menial work that no one loves doing. So that's a situation that's very real. Other folks?
And writing comments.
Yep, for sure.
From my side, I'm the hosting architect for Datacom. We're looking at how we better secure and better utilize specific use cases for MCP rather than simply just allowing access entirely to MCP, which could potentially, present vulnerabilities and stuff.
Yep. And is everyone happy with what their MCP servers are kind of doing or what their AI is currently capable of doing? Is there something that people are wishing they could get more out of from these tools right now?
I think it's a vast improvement on not using the tools. I think the biggest problem at the moment is getting authority to be able to use them and use certainly specific ones. Because obviously an MCP server is a bit of an open book in terms of what it can do. So there's a lot of governance concerns around
Yep.
its safe use. That's
What
how to solve that problem.
When people are coming in, how do you trust, if you trust your MCP at all? I guess the human review is the natural element, but if you're coming in and looking at that, how do you know that you've got essentially the standards up to snuff? Is it CI/CD tests? How are we navigating that space?
A bit of all of the above. CI, real world deployments. Unfortunately, even good Terraform tests with a module as example, if we're talking modules in isolation, doesn't really prove a great deal. The interesting problems often come about when you start to stitch things together, and there's obviously a multivariate ways that you can put things together and expose curly use cases that you don't see when you're testing something in isolation. So it's a combination, I guess, of CI/CD to capture what you can in that mechanism, testing the same thing, but then also bitter one experience, and that comes back down to comments in the code and that sort of thing, saying, hey, we do it this way because of this thing, which might not seem immediately apparent, but is related to this thing over there.
Mm-hmm.
I think also just to add to Stu's point early on is about adding autonomy to workers that they can do their work reliably and securely without questioning whether or not what they're doing is valid.
Yeah, I've been joking with Mark that I've been slacking on the community call emails and reminders, so I feel like I need an MCP that's going to just send those for me automated. That's another thing where when you're busy, you can show up to a call that just ends up on my calendar. I'm like, oh shoot. So
yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to be able to use the current crop of coding agents like Copilot and Claude Code outside of a coding construct. So you can obviously have these things inside your IDE where you use Markdown, use MCP servers. You can use it for architecture validation, what if discussions, and all that sort of thing. The power of MCP versus not, in my opinion, is it's grounded in modern or up-to-date documentation. It's typically better at citing links which actually work, so then you can go cross-check what's been said. But ultimately, with AI generally, it doesn't take away the responsibility that you have for the deployment. In that it stops with a human. I'm yet to see any scenario that ends well, where the AI is the last reviewer. Put it that way.
Has anyone tried like bringing on a less or a more junior engineer or someone who might not be as familiar with the code base and letting MCP plus like sort of walk with them through that? Has it turned out okay? Has it turned out to do a bunch of weird stuff? Or do you even just avoid that altogether because the knowledge share isn't actually occurring?
Exactly. I had someone come in who was using Claude and engineering stuff and just was stuff he didn't understand and looked at it and said, right, here's an edge case you're going to run into. Have you considered this? Oh no, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's not been a lot of fun to put that in front of a junior person and have them, write that, or because they don't. The phrase I always use is, if you don't know what good looks like, it's really hard to trust the outputs.
So I'll add to what Hamish is saying is that with somebody junior, you have a set of expectations that they'll meet a certain criteria of standard, which although we're anticipating or we're expecting that they understand the first time that we're explaining, it's not necessarily that they'll understand that in the first go. We might have to spend more time with them just so that they start understanding logic. And I've had the experience of dealing with that with even more senior people, where it takes a bit more time for them to understand what the logic is about and how the whole architecture or the code base is being put together and for what reason. So it's not just only the junior people. I have that experience with some of the senior guys as well who struggled with it. And that's my 2 cents.
So it seems like the more senior people need to learn what the heck the AI itself is doing, and that can almost time sink just as much effort as if the senior person was doing it themselves.
It's a bit like when you build an automation, like all of your initial effort is put up front. If you can actually get them through that initial time sink, ultimately you do save time in the long end, but all of that time investment is up front rather than, might be a couple of days to get them up to speed rather than, an hour a day for a couple of weeks. It is less time, but it feels like more because it's all up front.
Yeah.
And then there's the natural learning curve as well. Sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
You're all good. What Hamish mentioned about the upfront time investment, I think that's a really good shout because back in Datacom, we've had senior engineers build sort of workflows that guide more of us junior engineers, I guess you could say, through the standard process. If there is that upfront time investment from a senior person that allows them to, I guess, like put their brain and their notes and their processes down into a standard process, and you just have an agentic workflow, then that can really help the junior engineer in understanding the code base first of all, and then following the deployment process in a standard manner. So yeah, it is really important that the senior engineers are able to just have that upfront time investment. But of course, that's hard to find that time.
Are the senior engineers buying into that? Are they, at least from your organization, saying, you know what, this is worth it if it's going to make the junior job easier and my job easier in the long term? Or are they kind of calling BS on that?
I think it chops and changes between orgs. We've had a pretty good experience so far, or I have, with most of the senior engineers. A lot of them are receptive to sort of putting in that upfront time investment so that the junior engineers can have a better process. Yeah, I think a lot of it does just come down to your typical mentoring where they sort of point you in the direction of things to learn. But especially with code bases, I think that's where it's most valuable.
Yep, 100%. Lol.
So coming from a military background, we've had the processes where you would go through certain trainings, and those trainings would then be reiterated over a particular period of time by a regimen, essentially. And what that does is it really hones in your skill, actually, and they set an expectation of what is required of a junior personnel joining the organization. And a lot of organizations, I see junior engineers struggling because they fail to either get on their regimen, or there is no regimen in that organization that would provide that level of training. So training and mentorship go hand in hand when you're trying to bring somebody up to speed in a large organization.
Makes sense. So do you think that AI is helping or harming that regiment development? Are you finding that seniors are writing more of their knowledge share down and you're getting more clarity for the junior engineers? Or do you feel like it's the reverse where now juniors are kind of never following a peer programming process in the traditional sense, or they're lacking that?
With the timeline for a project delivery and the ease of getting the answer from an AI tool, the knowledge, the logic, the algorithms that we use to spend time on learning, that is being taken away from a junior engineer, because he's looking at the easier way of having that AI develop the logic and then just have it run. So essentially, the foundation is not being built because you have that tool, which is fine. I mean, that's okay that you have a tool that's doing that for you. However, I believe that the AI hasn't matured to a point yet where it's beneficial in certain ways. And I believe that foundational knowledge is imperative at this stage, at least.
Yeah.
I think
Makes
that's
sense.
partly about sort of meeting people where they are as well. So I think there's a recognition that if you don't provide a similar workflow to what you can do with Claude, ChatGPT, and so forth, literally go ask a question and get a contextual answer. If you're not considering that as part of your documentation and part of your process, then people will just go, hey, this is too hard. I'm not going to read yellow pages when I can just go ask an AI and get a contextual answer to my specific problem right now in 5 minutes. Of course, the risk of that latter approach is that as I think Hamish said earlier, it's having that grounded in experience and knowing when it's when to challenge it and when it's the right answer. And that's really hard, and I think that's why the former approach is better, that you actually do need to take time to make the tools, to publish them and encourage their use, but in a way which I'm going to use the word modern. I hate it because modern gets put in front of everything, but it's more modern than just going to ask people to read the F in docs. So
Yeah, I think there's something very human about that, where you don't want to necessarily bother people all the time. And I mean, if peer programming sessions are sitting there and like 2 hours of the senior dev's time is sort of not actively necessary, but there is that 15 minutes that makes the difference between the code being ready for merge and having like 3 or 4 different things that spiraled in the wrong direction because the AI pushed it in a certain direction. That's a very real um, fork in the road, if you will. I wonder if AI can ever catch that, if the senior, like you said, kind of knowledge shares with the tooling or the agent or something skills wise to keep that junior developer on track. But it does remove a human element too, of just even having that human to talk to.
it's not an either or. I think it's a how much knowledge can you impart on the, I wouldn't call it the basic stuff even, but just the groundwork, I suppose, so that you can spend more time focused on the truly more interesting problems.
Mm-hmm.
But how useful and how successful is it? I think, well, at least in my perspective, the court's still out on that one. Jury's still out, should I say, on that one. Yeah, it's the curate's egg. It's good in parts.
I still think there's a big tension between training your juniors and the intermediates in good solution architecture, good design patterns, and all the non-functional practices and processes such as security, NSRs, and all that, so that they can actually vet or confirm that the content or output you get from any AI tools or configuring data sources and other things through MCP servers are actually right, and that's part of their career progression. So there still has to be a significant amount of time teaching them academically or practically what good code looks like, instead of just relying on the AI tool to do it for you and trusting the output implicitly. Because in all the projects also there is a good degree of still the seniors and the solutions architects validating what their tools are doing at the beginning of the work or the beginning of the project and tweaking it. Even if you get into the advanced places where you're doing RAGs and agents, you know, chaining up and doing the whole software development thing, some body somewhere either has to train the tools on a whole lot of data or spend some time vetting it and doing that type of training on the data. So I still think the juniors still need to have that career progression, that career plan, in order to teach them what is good software practice, what is good Azure cloud practice and solutions. So then they learn to use the tools better and can vet the output of the tools.
I'm completely in agreement with Storm, and in continuation with that as well, it's adding another step of learning for a junior engineer that he's, for example, getting an answer from ChatGPT, which he has to now go and validate against the documentation, let's say Microsoft, that whether the solution that's being put together is up to mark, because ChatGPT, as we know, isn't the holy grail and makes terrible mistakes at times. So the confidence level on AI again is not there, and as Storm has put it, to have those foundations in place to be able to then deliver that document to a senior person, an architect, a senior engineer, project manager. You know, that due diligence needs to get done, and that comes from being trained by somebody in a higher position.
Does having both in AI, well, I think we're talking about junior engineers who are chucking around code willy-nilly and not actually being trained up through that process. If AI is trying to essentially do the work of the senior developer in addition to the actual senior developer scheduling and peer programming, maybe this is optimistic and maybe this is just devil's advocate, but I feel like that would be more effective or efficient. I could be wrong, but maybe it can also misinform or give you like 3 things that are wrong, but then theoretically you can go back and tune it, right?
But that's
or
where
am
the
I?
complacency part comes in. That's
Yeah.
where you get complacent about that. Yeah, you know, but if it's throwing out, 3 options and 2 of them are correct, okay, I'll present it to the senior architect, and he'll pick the 2 correct ones, and he'll ignore the third one. So he'll do the job for me. I don't have to put in the due diligence.
hmm
See where I'm going with this? So the complacency part starts coming in. And to be honest with you, I've done it at a very senior
Yeah.
level. I've created a document, and without doing the proper due diligence, I haven't added to a document, but the temptation's been there.
Yeah. It does take the senior person to make sure that everything is working, or even to just make the decision. Okay.
The other
Cool.
challenge, I think, is the lack of determinism on the AI aspects of the process. So, if you're writing a Go program, if you're writing, Bicep or Terraform modules, you can write test cases for them, and you can rely on them to test what you expect. Whereas if you're using an agentic LLM component to do something, its output is never guaranteed. And yes, you can steer it through various means, but it's difficult to prove that a change still works when you start dealing with more complex systems that chain together.
Yeah. Like, where does the single crack that breaks kind of occur on that
Yeah.
fault line? Okay.
or even just, sorry, I had a junior developer create some KQL queries, and he
Mhm.
just generated using Claude. And I went, well, this will work, but it's really inefficient. It's using computationally expensive operators here. If we're going to be running this every 15 minutes on an alert rule, it will work, but it'll get expensive very quickly. And he had no idea that particular operators are more expensive than others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cost is a huge piece that I think AI does not typically care about. Or even to be quite honest, like our PG, when we build these things, we were just trying to see if it can actually get it working. But the billing component is really hard to nail down because we don't have like a one size fits all billing model that we can just chuck at you so that you know how much it costs. Like I'm very unaware of how much you're paying for a KQL model, and so is the rest of my team. So that's an interesting piece to this puzzle.
It's just the difference in using I want to say using contains and has. Like contains is it uses a lot more compute than if you're running that every 15 minutes, close to 100 times a day.
Yep.
That adds up very quickly.
Yep. And you need to know that, which if you've never done KQL before, you're just like, oh, sure, it runs, it's successful, it gives me the results I want.
Yeah, you only notice if it's slow, basically, unless you know. If it's slow, then you might go, oh, how can I make this go faster? But if it's fast and it's expensive, then unless you're looking at the costs, then that's hidden from you, right? So I think it's a bit of a lens which is often overlooked on the CAF side of the fence as well. Yeah, and AVM too, because obviously you can't have, well, yes, not obvious, but you can't have all of the things. You can't have the resiliency aspects and availability and operational excellence and all the rest of it, and then also have it, run on the smell of an oily rag. So it's that compromise of knowing when you need to make those choices.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. I've taken up a lot of time just chatting about this, and I appreciate everybody sharing about it. Remainder of the time, I want to leave up to the group. I can obviously fill in with some other topics, but I don't want to just make this the Steven show. So, do people have things that are top of mind for them coming into this year? Cue the minute of silence.
Do you want to, are you able to give a bit of an update on sort of recent changes around the Azure, say Azure Terraform, CAF and AVM pieces? I'm not sure everyone in the group unless everyone in the group is already over it and heard it a million times.
I don't think this group is, I don't know how many people are involved in the AVM community calls in this group. Are people aware of those?
Well, Stu and I are for sure.
I am not aware. I am interested.
All right, Stu, take it away.
Oh goodness. Oh no, I'm not prepped for it. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I'll see what I can pull up then.
I was
'Cause
thinking
I'm
the thing
also
that Jared presented.
yeah. Well, there is a recordings page. That's a good thing. So I'm gonna just casually drop that in, and you can take a look at that. The thing that Jared was sharing. Which one was it?
I'm just going to the community call pages now and just having a look at it. It was 3rd December call, I think it was.
Was it
Slides.
talking about AZ API or?
Yeah, that was it. Yes.
Okay.
I've got the deck if you want me to share. I can.
Oh, sure. You're welcome to.
We can just if you I'll just pause over bits that are interesting. Give me a second. Cool. So maybe we skip forward to the AVM Terraform updates given the audience, and that's good. Skim, sorry, make everyone seasick. Bicep. Bicep. So if you care about Bicep, there's a whole big update on that too. There's a Copilot experiences. I'm not sure how that kind of fits into the discussion we were just having.
Yep.
Just
I'm
pausing.
happy to talk a bit
Yeah.
about this, but I think we were going to talk about the AZ API part first, probably.
Yep, sure. Yeah, let me just skip sort of. This is topical as well for what obviously we were just talking about, the
Yep.
Terraform MCP server.
And if you haven't seen this, we did record it for, I think, the October version of this call, which you can find on our YouTube channel. So.
Cool. Bicep. Going to one elephant in the room. I think this is it. So that's just talking about what's happening. Oh, the migration agent, is that worth a mention?
I actually don't know a lot about the migration agent, but I've heard things here and there.
Oh, we can skip over that. So there's just some usage of Terraform modules and how it's been changing over time, the AVM modules from Microsoft there and the trends. And just a point about V1, yeah, most of the modules, well, I think all of the modules, yes, all of the modules, sorry, are V0, and that's not an indication that they're not ready for production. That's negative, that they are ready for production. But it just means that at the moment there's potential breaking changes on the horizon, as it says on the screen. So when, cool.
Yep.
And I'm going to stop here. I'll hand over to you, Stephen, on this.
Yep. Well, this change was made and it's been coming down the road for a bit between the team from Jared and Matt, who are over in the AVM team. But what we've essentially backed for module development moving forward is AZ API as the recommended provider. There's a bunch of reasons that we can talk about it, and they're kind of enumerated right there, and I'm happy to talk through any of them. But the main thing is that if you're an Azure first shop, if you're familiar with Azure concepts, if you understand how the Azure APIs work, if services and all of that if you're familiar with all of that, you're going to have a good time with AZ API. If you do happen to be a Terraform first shop in the sense of your knowledge of HCL and your knowledge of how Hashi's other providers like the AWS provider and the GCP provider work, are critical to you, I do think Azure ORM, quite transparently, works a little closer to how the other Terraform providers do because it is Hashi owned. AZ API, on the other hand, because we are creating a Microsoft-backed set of solutions for modules, AZ API just makes a ton of sense for our field as well as our Azure first sort of users. So there's a bunch of reasons there in terms of why. There's some other specifics that I think in that deck they detail in terms of how things kind of work, but there are ways to even move from Azure M to AZ API. You can't do the reverse yet until the next major version of Azure M, I think. So there are a few different competitive advantages that right now AZ API has over Azure M. So I think this is really just putting our money where our mouth is when we say that it's a first-class provider and that it's not just a shill that you use to kind of, or a shim to get through until Azure M is available. You can really use it and back yourself behind it. Any questions, thoughts, responses, feedback?
Silly question. Azure RM as a resource manager will be removed altogether?
No. This is just for the Azure verified modules, which are a field targeting basically cloud architecture standards and making sure that your modules are developed in a way that is compliant to well-architected framework. That is not the same as the actual Terraform providers. We have two providers, neither of them are going anywhere. There's Azure RM and there's AZ API. They're both useful for different scenarios. We recommend AZ API when you're trying to build out some platform modules at scale, like the AVM modules.
Great, thanks.
Other questions?
I was going to say it relates to the
I
use
was-
of the provider. You can. Sorry, Hamish. You go first.
I was just going to ask about the Azure AD Terraform module.
Yep. What about it?
well, first of all, that's not going anywhere, I hope. And secondly, some colleagues of mine before Christmas were having issues with, does a consistency check where it renames users, groups, service principals to a temporary name and then renames them back. And that was failing due to a change in the Graph API.
Yeah, there
Yes, it
was a
was.
change. We rolled it back. It should be fixed now. Is it fixed for you all, or is it not working still?
I don't know because I haven't tried it since I went on holiday.
Okay,
I can jump in there. Yes, it was broken, definitely, as you mentioned, and there was a partial fix from our perspective deployed. It seemed to work most of the time. It seems to be having problems with more constrained permissions. So if you're using, I think, application read write owned by, the way that permission works and the way that it does sort of the change under the hood seems to be broken still, or at least unreliable. But it's much better than it was prior to the rollback, where it was basically, as Hamish was saying, it was making a temporary object and then not reaching consistency.
Yeah, it was sending 2 patch commands to the Graph API, which were not necessarily arriving in order, and so the Graph API was not processing them in the correct order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Azure AD provider, we're trying to get that fixed. Stu, can you send over maybe a repro or whatever details you have after this? And I just want to make sure that the Graph team who is looking at this is aware of the continued issues with some other fixes or the fact that it's not actually fixed.
Yeah, it could be, given the eventual consistency nature of some of these things, it might just be an unlucky thing. But it was, I would say, it was failing, say, 50% of the time before, and now I'm just seeing the odd edge case, and that could just be something that was actually wrong elsewhere. So I'm not saying, not saying for sure, but it doesn't feel right.
Okay. Yeah, we still need to get the long-term fix in. We're aware of what changes need to be made, and it will be a pretty big one. So we're trying to not rush ourselves into releasing something that breaks you again. Luckily, we're able to roll it back though. And to answer the original question, Azure AD is not disappearing tomorrow. MS Graph, which is a provider that Stu pulled up, is in fact going to be around as well. And this one is going to hopefully help unblock you from anything that Azure AD doesn't support. So very similarly to AZ API, we hope that you can use this as your sort of support for your variety of graph scenarios, which includes M365 if you have a need for that.
So we move along.
Yeah, this is going into some of the implementation details about the AVM changes. I think we can maybe go
Move it further. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Send this to as well.
Yeah.
Just shout out if you'd like me to stop. Interfaces. Again, quite specifics here. Things to consider if you're using AZ API.
Yep.
Again, quite specifics.
Yep, that seems like it's it. So definitely take a look at the AVM modules. I think they are doing a really good job of blessing, if you will, the approach to a AZ API platform development process. So
I can share one more thing. Have you seen TF mod make from Matt, Steve?
I think I've heard about it.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about that one?
Yeah, sure. I'll put it on the screen again and so you've got the link as well. So this is a proof of concept that Matt was playing. Matt White, for those of you who don't know, he I forget his title right. He's based in the UK and he leads the Azure Terraform team. I'm not quite sure. Stephen, do you want to explain his title and position? Sorry.
He's just, he's a PM who is really engaged with making sure that all of you who are building out cloud infrastructure have good sets of Terraform and Azure resources that will really help you build out well-architected framework, modules that are scalable, maintainable, platform ready, etc. So
So he has a YouTube, which if you want to see a demo of it, if you search for the similar Matt FFFFFF, obviously that's his name is Matt White, so haha. You can find a demo of this on his YouTube. Just to give a quick summary, it's a CLI tool. I'm not set up for a demo, unfortunately, but it basically allows you to scaffold an AVM style module, or even just a Terraform module straight from the API spec. So this isn't AI generation. This is going up to the REST API and querying it, and then on the basis of the information in the API, actually writing code. And it gets quite a long way. There's some good sort of usage instructions here which show how to use it. You can see, yeah, so here we're using it to make a container app managed environment, which is a module which is dear to my heart. And even down as far as actually making a full AVM style module. So for those familiar with that, you've got a base module, which is the main resource, and then you've got submodules. So if you think about, say, a storage account, the storage account itself will be the base module, and then you've got things like blob, support, table, queues, files that would be child modules within the storage account, and then wiring it all together and creating the interfaces and so forth. And it does a pretty good job of generating it from scratch. You okay if I share my blog, Stephen? I can show a quick screenshot from that.
You're welcome to share your blog. They won't flag me for advertising you or anything.
Cool. So just as give you an idea, because I don't have a video to hand, but if you're interested, so this is the managed environment. So this is one that I co-maintain with Microsoft. So, and this was produced from the tool with no edits. So you can see the coverage of the module there. It's got all of the components. In fact, it's actually got more coverage than the official AVM has at the moment. So I'm actually going to use this to go back and add some stuff which I've missed, like I think maintenance configurations as an example. But yeah, you can see that's the generation process there. It does the discovery of the child submodules and then creates them individually. If I maybe make that a bit bigger, might help. Yeah, a bit bigger. But yeah. So if you're in the business of making an AZ API module, then yeah, it's worth a look. It's still it's not official yet. But it's very cool. It's a great time saver. Yeah, and it's really interesting just as a curiosity how far you can go from the spec alone towards making a module. It's not quite end to end, but it's well, it makes something which plans, so it makes valid code. But in terms of meeting the bar of a high quality module, there's a few things which are unfortunately not available in the spec, which you sort of need to add manually at this stage.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Stu. And I do think it's a cool tool. We have 12 minutes left. What do people have for other topics? Or top of mind?
Everyone's quiet, so I'm going to ask Stephen, what's top of your mind?
Well, the MCP stuff I just shared about, I think I am trying to think about how we have a back burner of Azure M. We're doing a lot of thinking about how we approach the Azure M provider. That's not code words for saying we're thinking of leaving it. We're trying to think about how to really utilize Azure M and make the development process more efficient. One of the things that we do see is we see a lot of users who are unable to unblock themselves with Azure M and aren't necessarily willing to learn AZ API. So I think we're in the middle of brainstorming how we can solve that problem for users in terms of you're pretty dedicated to the Azure M provider, you're pretty familiar or comfortable with the Azure M provider. How do I make sure that you get the support and services that you need? So that's a thing on our mind.
If I can add something, with all the changes that we have discussed so far, and I understand that the wider community here has been on the receiving end mostly. However, it might be sharing a similar sentiment that you
I
might
think we're
have.
getting to the point where we can automatically create.
Sorry.
You good? So with all these changes coming in, there's a steep learning curve. It's not only for the junior engineers, it's for people who are actually in a senior position where they have to also understand the changes that are coming in while working on projects and delivering on a previous version of technology that was being used. So that keeping up with that learning curve by its own is a challenge. And I believe a lot of the people actually fall off the wagon because of the changes that are coming in so fast. I mean, forget about your AI at this point. Even the changes that are coming in that we just talked about, Azure API or CAF that Stu and I had been working, and I was completely lost until Stu actually stepped in and he helped me out actually with one of the deployments. So that learning curve on its own takes a lot of the time and comes with a lot of pressure as well. I don't know how much other people will agree with me. That's something that I have experienced lately.
Yeah, it's hard. I think there's a lot to keep up with in the Azure space and in the Terraform space, and making sure you do it all in a way that meets the standards that are required. It's funny, I think I've shared this before in the call, but the two pieces of feedback we get is that features don't come fast enough and features come too fast. And I feel like that is sort of highlighting the parity or the experience where it's like we want things when we want them, but at the same time, it's almost overwhelming to try to keep up with everything that's happening in this space. And that's a real struggle in and of itself.
I have a bit of a question. So coming
Go for it.
from more of a junior perspective, I guess I've been in the industry for a couple of years now almost. But I find that a lot of this news, new stuff around Terraform, the providers and whatnot, I consume a lot of that information from the senior engineers, and I personally feel that, it should be us juniors or relatively junior should take some more initiative in consuming that knowledge ourselves. Is there anywhere that you would point us towards to sort of be on the forefront of these changes? Like I know the AVM team and the community calls are really useful as well, but is there anywhere that you would, point us to sort of subscribe to or yeah.
Yeah, I think obviously the Azure Terraform community channel where we have these community calls recorded, if you want to catch up on them, uh, coming out to conferences like HashiConf for the PowerShell Summit, the AVM community, and then Mark Tinderhold, who pops in here and there. He's also a good resource for learning about Terraform and Azure. I'm definitely missing some other people as well, but I think just there are a few names and resources I think people can feel free to also add to the list or even drop something in the chat. So there's a lot that is available today.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. And of course, there's documentation on like the Terraform registry and Microsoft Learn. So there's that. Okay. Any other topics with our remaining 5 minutes?
I'll just do a quick promo on behalf of Mark. So I just found his Udemy channel. So I'm sure he'll love me for this. I'll collect my payment later, Mark. So here you are. So Mark's very active on all the socials, and he's also got his own Udemy Terraform 101. So if you're looking at getting into it, so it's even on sale at the moment. So there you go.
Yeah, I don't think I'm allowed to market things that cost money. But I'm totally game for you bringing it up and talking about it too. Azure Terraformer is his YouTube channel, so he does have some helpful content there.
Use coupon code Stu at checkout.
Yes. All right. Any last topics?
Thanks, Stephen, for the updates.
Yep. I'll give the 5 minutes back and appreciate all of your thoughts. And Happy New Year, everybody. I'll chat with you all either in March or in February, depending on what time zone you're in.
See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye. Cheers.
Bye bye.
Thank you.